coming out the jacket cause we're turning up the heat. I wanna see you clapping when you get about your seat. It's time to make it happen when we hit these streets. I'm coming in hot and I can't be beat. Watch out now. Everybody watch out. Watch out.
Welcome to episode, it's a great intro, isn't it, Dan?
Brilliant.
Welcome to episode 52 of Agencyphonics, and quite a momentous day today because, and a bit of a coincidence as well, Dan, because not only do I have the wonderful Dan Gilbert as my guest today, but second of all, the new book's come out, and it is probably twice the size of the first book. I think the first book is half as thin. I think maybe we have typeset it a bit more spaced out, but nevertheless, it's got 50% more content. We've rewritten it for the post-COVID world. We've changed a couple of the chapters around, and the reason I said a coincidence really is that I just reminded Dan of this pre going live that when we brought the first book out, actually, we only thought that we would give it to the people who rang up and needed some help. So we thought we'd sell 2 or 3 dozen copies of it. We never thought it was going to sell 15,000 copies or, and which, bearing in mind, there's only in the UK alone, there's only 25,000 agencies, I think is the number. The drums say it's about 16,500. So to sell that many books is amazing. But Dan, you wrote the very first Amazon review.
It's because I'm quick off the mark, Spencer. I must have read it quickly or something.
I tell you what, I'm so grateful for that review because I swear that review you wrote led to a good proportion of those book sales. And I think I know Pete and I are really grateful that you wrote that review, and also a genius piece of marketing because how famous every single agency in the country knows who you are now because you're the first review on there. So
yeah, well, it was genuine, Spencer, and it was funny because at that time, I mean, I've been to some of your events. And we'd met a few times, but never, and you speak to competitors as well, but never had you ever seen written down on a piece of paper, a codified version of all the things that you're thinking about as an agency owner, but you just don't really know, and you can't really make sense of what one person said versus another. So it was really transformative for me, not just for sort of our own yardstick, but also even for when other people would come to me and ask stuff, I was like, well, read this first and come back to me later.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, and I think that's interesting because, as a successful agency owner, a founder, owner, and, you've scaled tremendously. I think, paying it forward, I found was a natural thing. And I'm sure, you're becoming a role model now to a lot of the next generation of agencies. So, and it's, quite a commitment. So if you can give them a book, recommendation, that will always help. So
you don't know if you're saying the right things as well, do you? It's quite a difficult job because what's right for you might not be right for everyone else. So.
No, and I think the other thing is we have to when we wrote the book, we genuinely tried to pick the common denominator, the things that we see time and time again. Of course, I mean, I would still say now, we went into an agency, Dan, the other day, Pete and I, and they were based in Southampton, so not London, not major city, and their day rate was £1,500 a day.
Very nice.
And we were like, okay, now we've got good clients on £1,200 a day, but most agencies are £700-800 a day. And I'm like, how are you getting £1,500 a day rate? And he showed us, and we were like, okay. And so we still learn new things every single day, but it's spotting those patterns and then trying to share.
We had the same sort of things, and you look at particularly in the context of the book for anyone that's picking up the first time, and I've had this with other people. It's like, well, we're not that, and we're not that, and we're not that. It's like, great, but try and explain why that is, because if that agency in Southampton can articulate how they're able to charge nearly double a standard agency, then they sort of know how to lean in further into that, or know why they might be losing out on some stuff where they just need to be a bit more competitive, but do it knowingly, not without knowing that actually that's super high, right? Because they probably didn't even know, did they?
No, and there's that saying, you don't know what you don't know. I think. I'm sure there will be things that you do best in class. Every agency does certain things best in class, but there's always things that somebody else does just something a bit better somewhere else. But I think agencies are good for sharing and learning. But I just wanted to pick up on the thing you just mentioned. One of the things that always impressed me about Brainlabs, about you in particular, was in the early days. I'd obviously exited Blue Halo, and I think. Do you remember what year we first met? I feel like
2015, I want to say.
Okay, so 2000, and how far into the business were you?
We're about 3 years old, right?
Yeah, so
coming up to our 10-year anniversary.
But what really, wow, congratulations. Oh, and happy birthday for yesterday as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, I've announced to everyone that at 36, my professional football career is definitely over, given that everyone thinks Ronaldo's too old already. So. Oh, blimey, you've got
Caitlin's paying attention. Well done, Caitlin.
I'm sticking to agencies and no football for me anymore. So,
Yeah. Well, at least you can now, hang the boots up and give up.
Time to focus on Brainlabs, finally.
Yeah. So, no, but what I was going to say was what really impressed me way back when about you was, you're not a mass extrovert, right? You're not like, well, I don't know, maybe you are, but you don't come across as this kind of gregarious, outgoing founder, right? But you were two things. One, really vocal. Like, I remember in the early days, it was data. Maybe it still is, by the way. But you were data, Oxford grads. Am I right? Remembering that right? You talked about Oxford graduates. You don't remember yourself now. It's 10 years ago. But you talked about
professionalize some of our branding, and it's not that anymore. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, of course. But in the early days, you were really vocal on your your differentiator, why you were different back then. But also everywhere I went, you seemed to be there. Right? So you put yourself out there early on. You didn't, like a lot of people who are maybe good at doing, like they've kind of come. I mean, I know you actually started life in Google, didn't you? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, but you weren't afraid to come out and start to learn. That's what I'm saying. You did come out. You did go to these events. And I think that was really smart.
Yeah. I think the vast majority, and you talk in the book about marketing manager as a key hire. When you think about when that person is in, I think the vast majority of agency marketing is totally unremarkable. Like there's a sea of people doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is not this is a type of marketing theory that I'm sure agencies are espousing but don't apply to themselves, which is got to have some differentiation or distinctiveness, one or the other, like slightly different concepts. But if you produce a series of like webinars, content guides that are exactly the same as everyone else's, then like you're just not going to stand out in the slightest. So I always much rather do something that's singular, focused, and 10 out of 10 than like a series of things that's sort of 7 out of 10 and no one notices. So never afraid to put the name out there.
I
think
it's a good example because I don't know whether you still do, but I remember, I've got a good memory, I think. I remember you being at a dinner once with the subhost evening, and you were like, no, I start work at like 5 a.m. and I finish at 4 every day.
I wish I could now, but I start at 4:30, 5-ish, and I tend to finish by 6 and do bath time with the kids and but then shut off completely. So I don't answer emails after that.
But what I meant by that was, I think you were still out there. You went to a dinner one night, and I remember you saying, "Right, I'm going now because I start today." But I thought it was still good the fact that because a lot of people just wouldn't have gone to the dinner, but you still went and you were there. I think what I'm trying to get at is I think you put yourself out there. You were definitely very distinctive with your branding in those early days, and in a way, I think it seemed to me outward in that, obviously you were delivering great services and doing great work as well. But I'd love to talk to you today about the different stages of growth. And I know a lot of people listening will probably listen to this, post live show will probably want to know a little bit about those stages. Because where are you today in terms of size now?
About 500 people now, just over the 500 person mark. So
it's so impressive. So impressive. And so,
still a startup, Spencer. It's like Amazon's day one. We're tiny, so
you still have a culture of a startup.
Well, that I don't know if you come across Jeff Bezos's day one thinking. Yes. I like that a lot, which says, well, it's always day one because, and this is maybe a character flaw rather than a positive thing. But I don't look back and think, God, we're massive. Like, I honestly think we're tiny, and we still don't have market share. And I'm looking forward, saying we should be 10 times the size that we currently are. As a concept that I'm not sure if you've lost in and amongst your agency theory around thinking 6 months ahead. And I've embellished that a little bit to start thinking even further ahead and planning the whole agency around not just what we are, but what we want to become. And, if we're selecting an HR platform, the wrong question is, will it work for our 500 people? It's like, what's the pricing, and will it work for 3,000 people or 5,000 people? Like, tell me now, and what's the pricing that we've agreed up front, because we're getting there. And I think, when you apply that to the context of the growth stages, part of those growth stages are driven by a mentality that says, I don't want to be this size. I want to be 3, 4, 10 times the size that I currently am. Yeah. If you don't have that mentality in the first place, then it's not going to happen. Like, none of the stuff, whatever the story of each of the phases are, and we'll try and make them distinct as much as we can. But whatever those stages are, it doesn't happen by accident that you wake up one day and your business is double the size that it was the year before. Like, it's mentality, thinking, getting everything right, but pure determination to make that happen as well.
What I love about that. I think you're right. It's funny because my experience has been that one of the biggest challenges the biggest thing that holds back most agency founders is mindset. I mean, it's funny. I read all Peter Drucker's books, and actually, I came to the conclusion once I read everything that even he agreed that, because he said the culture trumps strategy for breakfast line, but actually, in reality, in his books, he said, in the end, it all comes down to mindset and the growth mindset. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. It was a bit of a cliche book. The biggest challenge I find with agency people is thinking bigger, and thinking bigger, then putting a plan around that and then trying to find a way to execute it. I mean, I love that you do that. And I think a lot of people, even last year, I think forgot to stop sharing with the team the vision, the plan, and maybe you come up with a 5-year plan, but then you don't review it every year. So I love that you do that. And I think you're obviously hugely ambitious. That comes across as well.
Well, we're going to be number one in the world, Spencer. So what can I say?
There you go. So what does number one in the world look like? I mean, will that be number one as an independent agency? Or
and there's lots of different ways to measure this thing, but I think by saying best is a cop out. Like, we want to be number one by revenue, and I think people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10, which I think stands true today for us as we come up to our 10-year anniversary. But
I know that also, the money's not everything to you. I mean, you came number one in the Drum's most respected league table recently.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, if there was a measure like that, I would take that any day. But that was definitely the proudest moment of my whole career, where it was that was amazing.
But I would say to you, and I say that you obviously, I know a lot of agency people, and I would say that I can't remember who said the quote. That your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It was I wasn't know if it was Steve Jobs or it was someone or Jeff Bezos. It might have been Jeff Bezos actually.
I can't remember, to be honest.
I think that's you. I do, because I think whenever I'm out and about and I talk to other people, people always speak really fondly of you, and they always speak highly of you. And I think you are you're a very good example of a good CEO, a good leader of a business, because I'm being really nice to you, aren't I? Because basically you do, though, when you go on LinkedIn, you demonstrate thought leadership, you do, and you write, and even though maybe that's not in your outgoing personality, you do put yourself out there and you do lead from the front. And I think that's a really, you are a very inspiring person. So I think you deserve that accolade, even though one of my clients was a bit lower down, I wanted them to win it.
It's incredibly kind of you. Thank you. And I think I've always said that there is definitely a restless ambition in the business, in myself and the people that we're there. But at the end of the day, if getting to number one means not being very nice, then forget it. We need to be able to turn around at the end of the day and say, I've had a great time doing this, and I've really enjoyed the company of the people who I'm with, because I choose to work. I don't have to. It's I do it for fun and the ambition and the challenge and so on and so forth. And part of that is really enjoying the company of the people that you work with and everyone that you've had an impact on. So to hear that people say nice things about us when we're out there, really honestly, thank you so much. It's very
They do in large numbers, and I think the fact that you do incredibly nice things like write good book reviews, that helps as well.
The nicest thing I've ever done.
I'm sure you do lots more nice things. What was the thing you were doing during last year during lockdown? You did loads of stuff around catering school meals and stuff, right?
We did a bunch of school meals. We did cater. Well, this was in the UK, so I'll be careful about when I say we. The UK business, did a number of things in the area, but it was I think you said, you'd pick up on this, you'd said, it's nice to think ahead. I mean, I can promise you in the depths of COVID, we were not thinking ahead. It was like survival mode. What are we doing now? So everyone can forgive themselves for not being particularly strategic at that moment. But loads of stuff.
I think actually, by the way, I think that paid media businesses in the short term got hit the hardest.
Of course. It's all just
years everyone has said to me, oh, you've got to be in paid media, it's retainers, it's fee income, it's regular revenue, it's the holy grail. And actually all the project businesses all had so much forward bookings, they were fine. No one was cancelling mid-project, but the paid media businesses did get a bit of a kicking for a quarter, 2 or 3 months. So
even in the first 3 months, even more so than traditional media, because most of that is booked up front. So it's one of the only discretionary line items in an entire business is the paid media spend, which was always a benefit of paid media, that you could put it up and down and left and right. But obviously,
I saw the campaign article that I think it was Dentsu had reported that global advertising revenues had doubled in the last quarter, I think, outside of the EU. Right. So clearly the bounce back and the growth of technology and other sectors now as a result of pandemic is probably seeping through to you, I hope.
It's been, I think you put yourself in a position to capitalize on any wave of transformation that happens, and lots of different factors came together. You know about the digital acceleration. We were in a great position, and we've had this year one of our strongest years ever. So talk about bounce back. It was more like a tick shape than a V shape. During that 2 months,
everyone said it was. See, a lot of people talked about the V, and then someone said no, it's going to be more like the Nike swoosh.
Oh, so we weren't a swoosh. We were more like a square. We were more like not quite a square root without the bit at the top. Like it didn't flatten. It just came back up fast.
Nice.
Because I think to that end, yes, it was discretionary. Everyone could press pause on media, which is the largest part of our business, but then realised shortly afterwards that maybe it wasn't as bad as they had initially anticipated. So it all kind of started coming back, and then you had this mass wave of digital transformation from businesses that hadn't bothered with digital previously, that just needed to, and just accelerating like crazy. So we had a string of new business, and adapted really well to the remote pitching process and onboarding processes and people onboarding processes, and just really rode with great momentum out of that wave. It was a long 8 weeks in between when the graph hadn't started coming back up, and it was a long 8 weeks when it was bouncing back up to where we were previously. But after that, it was kind of back to the usual old problems of how do we hire quicker, and there's this opportunity that we can't service, so we can't pitch, and blah blah blah. So which was refreshing, and we enjoyed it.
Mention to everyone that in your spare time you like to paint, and we can see some examples of your artwork behind you.
Yes, stunning. It's a lockdown special. It's one way to keep the kids busy, is a piece of canvas and paint, and they get busy for hours. It's brilliant.
Those of you listening on the podcast, not the vodcast version, there are loads of children's paintings behind down here.
What do you mean children's paintings? They're my wife's.
Oh, bless. So to talk to me about these stages then, I mean, I know it's 10 years. I've got to ask you to cast your mind back, and there's always rose-tinted glasses syndrome. But like he was, what would, if you had to sort of describe the stages, how would you describe them of growth?
I don't know that necessarily, because I haven't prepped this, but maybe by the end of the story there'll be stages that overlap and all the rest of it. But I think you very much differentiate the kind of startup stage, like kicking off, right, where you wear all hats, you're doing everything, and actually can be quite lonely, right? It was probably loneliness that drove me more than anything else to hire someone quickly, and that's drove me to make enough and to bring enough in to have someone else to employ, because I just didn't want to sit there all day by myself. So I am a people person. Like I don't like being on my own. So it was real hustle at the beginning, right? Like whatever stories and missions you hear later about this, that, and the other, like there are no missions at the beginning. There never is, right? It's like make ends meet, move out of my parents' attic, make enough to go out for dinner with my mates and whatever else, and just hustle hard. Like nothing's given to you, like no one's waiting for you. It's an absolute fight. Like, and if you don't fight, you don't survive, and that's why 90% really don't. I can't remember what the stats are, but you pulled them out somewhere about number of businesses that fail. Well, if you go in looking for an easy ride, it's just not there. So I think there's probably a shock to the system for most, or some that go back to consulting or freelancing or back into businesses. And if you write out
a large number of people that they never shift. A lot of people who want to go from freelancer to, I almost say freelance to founder of an agency, or I always wanted to do an event around sort of, fear to founder, because I think there is a step where you suddenly have to recruit people, and you sound like you did it because you were kind of doing everything and it felt like you'd make your life less lonely and a bit easier. But do you remember, was it an easy decision? Did you win a couple of bits of business that made it?
It was super easy, Spencer, partly relating back to what you just described, which was I knew I didn't want to be a freelancer or a consultant or whatever. I wanted to build a business. And I was in that mindset already. So it was like, it was the soonest thing that needed to happen, because what's the common denominator of any business? Well, it's more than one person, for sure. I knew that much. And I knew at any point that it was never going to scale if I didn't teach someone else how to do the work and then take on more stuff myself. And that's remained a theme all throughout my career. And I still have a running list of things that I'm doing that other people could potentially be doing, because I cannot be a blocker to the growth of Brainlabs as a business. But if I leave too many bottlenecks that come to me, then I will be. And that's happened.
It's funny because as you grow, I always say to people, as a leader, you have to delegate away the tasks you don't like, and two, the tasks that maybe the value. I don't know if you ever read that article I wrote a few years ago on delegating away low value tasks. Like,
where you get a rate or something like that. I like that.
I think Stephen Bartlett wrote a similar thing in his book. And I'm sure maybe it's not unique. A lot of you probably figured it out as well along the way, but it is a very important thing. I think it's a really good tip for anyone listening is, write down all of the things that really, you said that sort of block you from doing the job, but also I guess it's the things that would be easier to pay someone else.
Absolutely.
Do that task for less money and free you up.
The reason I wrote it down was that it's not necessarily immediately when you're doing something you realize I get someone else, but once the list is long enough, you're kind of thinking, okay, that's enough to fill someone's time. And as soon as you bring them in, it's like, oh, what did I do before? Why did I do that before? So I think that was probably takes us to sort of second phase, which is the continuation of the theme, by the way. I would say all the way throughout the story is the mindset one, but also the business model one. Is like understanding what your business model is and what drives it. And I've always had a very clear sense that it's clear to everyone else in the business that, it sounds trite, but we're a client-driven business, and therefore our business is to bring clients in. No sales equals no business. To keep clients in, revolving door equals no business. And to grow clients. And then on the flip side, the people are the product. So hire the top talent that we can, and the culture are the conditions. So set the right conditions for them to do the best work of their career. And all of those things need to be right for an agency business to grow. And all of those are really quite straightforward principles that we've had in our business, and any functional agency will prioritize as their kind of key areas from day one, whether they're one person, 500 or 10,000. And those are themes that I know ring true in your book and come out very clearly. But
do you feel like you've sort of crushed every barrier, or do you feel like, was there a point in that early stage where you were struggling to break through at all? I'd imagine it's not been a straight line journey.
Yeah, it's never a straight line. I like your chart. It's never precisely straight, is it? I think momentum is quite difficult to get into a business, and I think there's been times where we started losing a bit of momentum, but that was the only times that ever happened were when we stopped focusing on those core principles, which is bring more clients in, keep current clients in, deliver an amazing product, grow clients, and bring in great people that are appropriate for what we're trying to sell. It will always be one of those things, right? There's lots of surrounding things that need to be right in a business, of course. Your legals are going to be right, and so on. It's like you go into great depth on this in finance, and I'm a big stickler for agency finances as well. But it's kind of you're counting nothing if those core ingredients aren't there.
Was it all organic? Did you take investment in early in the journey, or
no, we didn't. So maybe I'll get there. That's probably I'll call it stage 3 or 4. I don't know how many.
In the early days, you didn't. You
early days was all self-funded. Reinvest everything in the business. I think it was. I'd probably call it phase 2 is when we got our first proper office, and I'd say
how many people?
office is a generous word. It was more like a dungeon. It was like slightly below ground level with like bars on the windows in Kilburn between two gambling shops and a payday loan shop. And
Brilliant.
it was not the most glam, but we were super proud to have an office. And do you know what? Like we were and remain a humble but hungry business. And you always want to keep that level-headedness when you get too much praise and maybe it gets to you and you forget that actually like there's lots more to do. And loads more people that we can impact and clients who we can deliver a great service for. And, that never ends. So yeah, we got to Kilburn, and I think it was there that we won our first, what I would call, this is maybe stage 2, like enterprise client is the second stage of the business. And it was, we turned up for an RFI, there were about 4 or 5 of us at the time, and we didn't know what an RFI was because we weren't in an agency background beforehand. And we had to Google it, and it's not immediately obvious, I don't think. So okay, yeah, this sounds good. All right, sign us up. It was Which magazine, and the British equivalent of Consumer Reviews. I don't know where audience goes, but they were famous for reviewing products and services. So felt the need to invite 80 agencies to their shortlist or something. the type of pitch that we'd never participate in today, because it's like, what are you doing? But they saw something in us. We didn't know how brilliant it was, but out of all these names that we now know but didn't really know at the time, they said, this is special, and there's something going on here, that we've tried this, we've tried that flavor, we're willing to give this a shot. But are there more than 4 people who had all turned up to the pitch in the business? And we had just hired an intern the day before, so we were like, someone back at this people in the office person. They thought it was very funny. So and look, took a chance on us. And you need those moments in life where you get a sort of maverick agency, that a client that's tried a few things but really recognises something special. So after we won that business, and particularly after we started delivering for them, there was a whole new level of confidence that we had that we could do this, not just for small businesses that we've been signing up to date, but for enterprise clients. And that's probably where we kicked off in stage 2, starting to win some really enterprise brands, do great work for them. And win awards.
It's interesting you say that, because I just to pick up on that, I think I talk about them as step change deals. And sometimes you get these opportunities early on. And I'm always trying to say to people, when you get those slightly bigger, because in the early days for most people, the majority, it's sort of smaller clients, because you're smaller and there's a leap of faith or trust needed for a big brand to work with you. You wouldn't get past procurement, would you, if the contract value is twice the size of your company, so revenue. So I think that those step change deals I see them all the time. They're key. They can be risky though, because they suddenly come very big dominant clients. So you have to always win one and then try and get 2 more. But when they come up, you've got to try and win those deals, haven't you? Because they will be the game changers.
Well, I mean, when we signed that piece of business, it was about 65% of our revenue at the time. And, the phone would ring. But I use that as fuel, like as absolute determination, as per previous principle of no sales is no business, because that's not a business when you've got one client that's 70% of your revenue, to go and get more of the same, because we were doing a great job. So it was like, right, let's go get some more. And actually 7 years later, they're still one of our biggest clients, but fortunately, no single client more than 4% of revenue. So it's
that's very impressive. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah, makes
well
those
done.
phone calls.
By the way, as a metric, I love that. I mean, we talked to I had a theory that it should never really ever be more than your net profit, because if you lose your biggest client, you might lose your profit, but you won't lose people. But it does happen to everybody. Unfortunately, sometimes a big client comes in, dominates, and you can't dilute it. But I love that you've got 4%. I think I had a target.
But of course, you can dilute it.
Sorry.
Of course, you can dilute it, right? Like, what's to say you can't, right? Like that's what people say, right? But that's extremely limiting. It's like you definitely can. If you've won one piece of business that believed in you, well, then there's other ones out there, especially if you're doing a good job. They can become a bit of, what you call a fame client and a referral client. And these people were so happy with us, and we were so passionate about getting it right for them and making them look good, that they would call up other clients and say, actually, we've got this secret. It's Brainlabs. And just maximizing that as early as possible and just riding that wave. Like, if they chose you, they're not the only one in the world that saw something there, right? There'll be another marketing manager or director or CMO sitting there with exactly the same challenges in exactly the same situation, thinking, where's Brainlabs? I wish they'd call me up. or whoever you are. So I don't know, just
great.
Yeah.
So how many were you in Kilburn when you finally left there? What was the size?
Well, we were about, after we won that piece of business, and there was another couple of pieces of business that came along. I think there was a marketing manager that came. I can't remember who it was, but they sort of came to our office and said, "Well, I can't bring my marketing director here, can I?" So we were like, "Okay, well, we better move," and moved to King's Cross, which was before the whole redevelopment, and it was while it was all happening, and it was amazing. Like, it felt so great, and I would call that kind of the next kind of kick-on phase. Let's call it phase 3, where we got to 50 odd people and realized that now we actually had to write down, codify and define our culture, which we did in the form of a handbook that still exists, but it's iteration 25 by this point, I would have thought. But realized that we didn't meet everyone that came into the business, and talking about the product is our people, our only asset is our people. There's no plant and machinery, and the conditions in which they work can dramatically alter how they perform. So we can take someone from another agency and they perform better. It's like, what? Why? Better organizational structure, better culture, or more effective, more efficient culture, and everyone's happier. So we wrote it down. It was an absolutely brilliant thing to do, and I'd highly recommend it for probably anyone over the sort of 25 to 30 person mark, because at that point you're not going to necessarily know everyone intimately, and you might not even interview everyone. I think the way that it changed the game for us was that when I first wrote it, it was part aspirational. Like, at least half of it was like what we wanted to be, not what we actually were. And we said as much to everyone, like, we know this isn't true, but we want it to be true. And what do you bet? Like, it became true, right? Like, there was aspirational behaviors in there that everyone held themselves accountable and held me accountable to. And I didn't behave per the handbook at the time. But, you'd have people turn around and say, well, Dan, that's not very Brainlabs, is it? Including things like our scalability concept, where, I'd say, no, you have to check with me on commercials. And they'd say, well, Dan, I loved it when this happened. Dan, what are you talking about? That doesn't scale. What about when we're doing 10 times the amount of business that we're doing now? And I was like, I'm so proud of you. And yes, we're going to write it all down, a flow chart for how to set commercials in different situations and blah, blah, blah. And, alas, it worked. And I think that was probably one of the finest moments of my career. And I would call that cultural connection to fast thinking, or to future thinking, stage 3, where things really kicked off, and we set the wheels in motion.
It sounds like, and I'm sure, I know that, again, I'm always trying to be realistic and have these conversations, because sometimes we can all be guilty of just making it all sound brilliant. I know that you would have had your challenges through all these stages, but it sounds like, to a certain element, you managed to empower your team through those values and behaviours to take more ownership of supporting that growth plan, right? Rather than them having to become subservient in a hierarchical structure.
Oh, we thought deeply about what separated those who we would have thought of as like high performers from the rest, and only in a way to help bring up the capability of everyone in the business. And we just noticed that, like, they wouldn't solve client problems. They would anticipate what future client problems look like for their client and all the other clients in the business and the clients that we didn't even have yet, and design processes or technology to support that. And you think, that's where the magic is, right? Like, that's how I think, and that's how, the people that are thinking ahead are thinking. And therefore, as soon as you teach everyone and say, look, these are the things that we care about, and this is what we're going to rate you against, and this is how we're going to judge your performance, like, give people solid examples, and they kind of get it, right? You hire bright people and show them what you care about, and it quickly follows from there. So it's not magic. It never is with these things, and you don't go from A to B with any great ease. You just, there's a relentless, pursuit of what you need to achieve, and you get there, right?
Did you find at 50 that if you remember, cast your mind back, how much of the original team were there at 50? Was it a lot of them, or had the business, because you obviously grew quite quickly, did the business outgrow? Because when you're growing fast, sometimes people don't always keep up with the growth of the business, do they? Some people do, some people excel, and some people get left behind a bit because they're not progressing as fast.
Yeah.
Or do you still have the same team at 50?
I can't remember precisely, but we had definite carryover of a similar team from sort of 5 to 50, let's say, and probably beyond that to 100.
Right.
But I mean, we're always with what you just described, which was the people coming in, people leaving, and even more so the phase after that. Like there's just, when you grow as a business, like what got you here won't get you there. I heard this analogy of if you're on a voyage and you were taking a ship from A to B, and by the time that you'd got from A to B, all of the planks had changed. Is it still the same ship? And I thought, well, as long as there's no missing planks, and you've done a substantial amount of rebuilding as you go, then like that's going to have to happen, right? Like the ship that you set out on this incredible voyage is not safe enough to get to the other side, and you will sink if that's what you think is going to get you there, because it's not. And like even in yourself, if you're the founder, CEO of the business, you've got to be self-aware enough to understand where your own strengths lie, and where your 7 out of 10 is just not good enough for what the business needs to be. I think if you're
I think I honestly believe that I've always recognized that the most successful people I work with have the greatest self-awareness and the highest EQ. Obviously not everyone's strong in every area, but they do have empathy, they do have self-awareness, and actually more importantly, they take time to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. And I admit, I only literally did an EQ test when I just redid my personal brand work with these guys at an agency called Jago. Yeah. They're EI qualified people. So I went through the emotional intelligence thing with them. I was actually thinking of introducing it as a service at Cactus for agency founders, because I do think that it's such an important thing to be able to be self-aware but also have high levels of empathy. I think it is. I think something like 80% of people with high EQ scores, or there's some stat around 80%. You're 80% more likely to be successful if you have high emotional intelligence. So I like that you picked up on that. I do think it's another thing to take from this podcast, which is, try and find someone who can assess you, because you might think you're self-aware, but then you're not. Because I'm so busy these days. My weakness was that sometimes I'm a little bit rubbish on small talk. I'm like, I just get straight into it, and I'm not sometimes stopping enough at the beginning of conversation. So it's good. It made me aware. Now I'm asking questions like that, but it's, you need to check in on yourself a bit, don't you?
Yeah. And I think in doing so as well, you can make work life much more enjoyable, right? Like there's, I don't know if that necessarily links into the EQ point, but there's going to be stuff that you prefer doing and stuff that you're good at, and hopefully they're the same thing, and so on. And you can, as a founder in particular, and this is the unique privilege of my own career and work life that I think everyone that's a founder or CEO shares, is that you can control that, and not many people can. You get to choose. Well, I don't want to do that bit, and as long as you've got someone brilliant to do it in conjunction with you, then good luck to you, right? Like that's an amazing privilege that we shouldn't waste.
It's funny, but there are so many people, Dan, who I think they forget that, like you're so caught up in the stresses of the challenges of business that you really sometimes should take the moment just to be grateful that you, especially if you are, an owner of business, that you have that freedom to, control stuff. And I think a lot of people would love to be in your position, Well, I mean, it's fun. It's so funny that you,
like in some of your language there, I can't remember exactly what you said in what order, right? But it was like stress, challenges, gratitude. Well, part of our journey, and probably, you'd alluded to it in the book about, your agency being a reflection of you, really. I think it is, if you're the founder, CEO, the leader of the business. And I see it, by the way, in every time I meet an agency, it's like, you can almost guess from who they are, like what their agency is going to look like. But I think one of the biggest shifts that I ever made that has made it an enjoyable journey and a sustainable one as well, right? Like I want to be doing this for another 20, 30 years and hopefully more. And, I wouldn't do that if it wasn't incredibly fun, challenging, but not stressful. And, working out, because everyone gets here, but working out how to turn that stress into challenges, into gratitude, right, is another entire level of it. Is the shift that I can't remember exactly what phase it was. It was probably actually around about the phase that we're talking about, sort of scale up, and suddenly like everyone else's problems become your problems. And if you're not careful with it, suddenly like holding everything. But shifting that mentality to just say, wow, like remind yourself multiple times a day that like I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity to serve all of these people that wouldn't have careers in marketing necessarily otherwise, or wouldn't learn at the pace that they would learn at otherwise. And how grateful am I for all these clients that have invested in us as a business and trusted us with their incredibly high marketing spends. What a privilege it is that we get to help them do better and reap all the rewards of making such an excellent decision. I thank myself every day, and I think that makes everything just a bit more. People ask about stress. It's like, well, it's not really a mode or a word that I use, because I get frustrated because things aren't moving fast enough, and like we can change it. But stress is like, well, it's outside of my axis of control, and it's negative. Is for how I describe it. Whereas we're privileged. Most things are in our axis of control. So go and fix it.
It's got better for you as you've grown, though, because I think that in the early years, you did it quite quickly as well. So some people take a lot longer to get to the 50 people level, right? Some people do it in 10 years, and maybe I think typically I see about 8 years. Whereas you crushed that, and you hit your Deloitte Tech Fast50. I remember very early on, and you accelerated massively up after that. But do you think that because you almost had to deal with those challenges early on, that now you're bigger, really you recognize them all again? I mean, they're probably the same challenges, just much bigger in some ways.
They do feel quite different, actually.
They make you more resilient, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I like resilience is, I say I wouldn't say it's most necessarily empowering. And it is an empowering word, right? Like you've got to be incredibly resilient. But I think even if you have to use the word resilience to describe yourself, then it's almost like there's so many bad things coming at you, so you need to be strong, right? Like, whereas actually I see all of what other people might call bad things as you called it challenges, right? Like how exciting is it that we get to work on interesting issues and as in the process learn to be better and get bigger and see them as our training partner, because in the gym, you're not going to get bigger if you don't have a training partner, or you're not going to get faster if you don't have someone to.
Someone is quite pragmatic. I think the challenge is for a lot of people is it's very emotional. So the challenges become, and I don't know whether you had this in the early days, you take everything personally. It's your baby, and I think as you scale, the business becomes bigger than you all of a sudden, and then it's easier to make slightly less emotional decisions, I think. Do you recognize that at all? Or
almost certainly. Look, I mean, I still care deeply enough about each person that has chosen to work at Brainlabs, even if I don't know them and will never meet them. So I do get upset when it doesn't fulfill someone's expectations of what they think it should be as a workplace. I feel a personal duty or responsibility to make sure that it is an exceptional place to work. I think that the difference is in caring, you have to look at it insofar as well, is this response serving me? Because if not, then move on. And if there's something to learn here, then learn it quickly and make sure that we've put something into place so that our communication is better, or that if I think something is not fair, then that's an issue in communication, not necessarily that someone's got it wrong, because people can't be wrong necessarily in their interpretation of what a business is. So, you definitely learn to manage these things. And now when I look back at certain times, I think, oh my God, that really bothered me. I wonder why, because we were just that big and blah, blah, blah. Well, you can reverse that. And where it comes from, there's a brilliant thought exercise, which is in any given situation, imagine how you'll think about this looking back in 10 years time. What are you going to do? Probably laugh, right? So if that is true, then why not just start laughing now? Because there you go.
It's funny you say that. I think that's a really great exercise for people to do, because recently I was thinking back to a very difficult time at Blue Halo, where we worked with a lot of entrepreneurial startups. It was the early days of the internet. And I think a lot of people now who work with startups will recognize that founders using their own money are highly emotive. But I look back and I remember culture came to a point where we as a business started to get into a very bad habit of blaming the clients, really for the way they were acting and behaving. And when I look back now, I go, I was just too emotionally close. Objectively, I shouldn't really have taken on those. I should have qualified harder. I should have learned the lesson quicker, that, that was a pattern that was happening. And I think, the customer is always right, which people don't always believe in. But I kind of was brought up to believe, and kind of lost it a bit in agency world. And actually came back to, I think when I look back now, I think there is always things that I would have handled differently with hindsight. So I think it is good to, forward the clock, look back and see whether you feel that, that is that really is going to be that much of a significant impact on the rest of your life or not.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think that the jump from 50, I don't know whether you would say 50 to 75 or 50 to 90, but the next jump for me, from my experience, a lot of my friends, obviously I was involved in the same period as well, and it takes usually something special to make that next leap. I mean, it can be, you merge with someone else, or you win a huge piece of business, which can be quite risky, or you take some risk recruiting people ahead of a growth curve. But can you remember the significant things that made that next shift up? And
yeah, it's funny because it is significant. We opened in the US
as well at that stage. Like, people can be quite profitable at 50 people, and then at 10 million, 100 people, that level, it can get quite difficult. Yeah. I don't know whether you experienced the same or not.
Yeah, no, it was. We opened in America, and that part of the business.
And can I ask, did you just open, or did you win a client in America and then?
We had clients that had business in America, and we had one client there. It wasn't significant enough.
But you had enough to start, okay.
But I'd spoken at conferences in America. We'd spoken to people in the market over there, and it was like, despite my fascination as a child, thinking that everything good came from America, in this instance, I think the the services that we were delivering at the time, which have changed substantially since, they were ahead of market, and they were ahead of the US market. So we thought, right, let's go for this. And, one of the best decisions that we've ever made. I mean, US is the graveyard of many British agencies who think that they speak the same language, and therefore off you go. Yeah. So we made some mistakes, and I think, it's bound to happen. But it's now more than 50% of our business, 4 years after opening, and we just grew incredibly fast. Had some amazing leadership, a guy who went over from our business and picked up and moved there for us. Dan, if he's listening, another man.
Do you remember, there was a guy in the supper club a few years ago. He had a translation business that was global. I don't know if you ever heard him speak. And it's interesting what you just said then, because I wish I could remember his name. I think it was Patrick someone, but he'd scaled globally his business. And he said the secret to growing international was get someone from your own team. Like, you go over for a bit, you take someone from your team, you recruit a native local, and then you get it off to the grounding start because you've got someone with your culture there. Yeah. It sounds like you did that right, because a lot of people
exactly
in America, they just fly in and fly out and don't commit anyone.
I think option number one, is to move yourself if you're really determined to do it. Maybe not. I mean, I'd always had this thing where it's like, with the self-awareness of what I was and wasn't, it was like.
You had a young family at the time, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had also a very young family. Yeah, so it was. I think it was more about I come in where there's a bona fide prospect, and there's a strategy to come up with, and you can get creative around that. But Dan, who went over there, the other Dan, was much better at the earlier phase of just generating opportunities and having conversations and so on and so forth. And I did a stunning job, and that's, when you talked about that seminal event that really changes the flavor of the business. I mean, it was that, and the growth of that business. By the time that we came to our first investment, which was what I would call, I can't remember how many stages we're on now, Spencer, but we're about 200 people.
The sort of 50 to 100 staff level. I think, I think there's often a lot of pains in there, but you're saying that step for you really came because you opened in America, and that clearly doubled your opportunity, well, probably 6 times the market. And you're right, it is the graveyard of a lot of UK agencies. Yeah. I remember we had an office, I had an office in New York, which was struggling. Everyone thought it'd be easy, but then, other offices would do really well. So it's never an easy thing, but yet clearly if you crack it, the market size is much bigger, right? And so, So you're saying that was really significant to that growth in that area. Do you think if it just been the UK, you would have struggled to do it as fast?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were equally focused on the UK at the time, so we didn't lose any momentum in the UK business. So I'd say, yeah, the UK was growing as fast as it could at the time, and all of the additional America revenue was all additional revenue. So yeah, I mean, it really doubled our trajectory.
What impact did it? I mean, you actually came number one on the Deloitte Tech Fast50. Like, didn't you come like 2 or 3 years in a row? You were in it. You're probably still in it. But did it have an impact on your business being recognised at that stage, or was it just all part of your?
I think they had international growth as one of the things there, and I think without it, we wouldn't have been growing as quickly. So yeah, it was definitely in the mix. But I can't remember what year that was, to be honest, and what stage. But I think there was. I mean, like with all these things, the entry point, they take like the entry point versus the next
4 years.
So we'd come from a tiny base, which we had, right? We'd come from a one-person, £100,000 first year or something. So, it looked, the percentage figures were bananas. Like, so, I mean, can't be too much into those things, but no, I mean, the pace of growth for an agency business was fantastic. Like, we never got too caught up in like what agency norms should or could be, because if we looked at them, then there was no precedent really, or very few in the last century. So we just kind of kept on blazing our own trail. And there's been a few since as well, which I'm delighted about, and I get phone calls sometimes, which is lovely. But really at the time, I think there was almost a limiting belief system within agencies and ecosystem, and like I think because tech was the new sort of poster child of business services, so everyone wanted to get some tech because that's the only thing that scales quickly. And I even got seduced by that for a good period of time. I was like, no, do you know what? Like, the agency business model, when you do a great job for clients and you bring more clients in, like discussed before, like it can grow, and it can grow pretty quickly, and it can be a hell of a lot of fun along the way.
It is funny. I did a talk, Daniel, about 2-3 years ago, just highlighting some of the challenges in the agency world, and then I did another talk I just kind of did one the other day, and I realized that all of those challenges have all been resolved in the last, because of the pandemic. Like 73% of employees wanted flexible working in agencies, and now pretty much everyone's flexibly working. There was issues around diversity, and of course now with access to more global employees, and actually all of a sudden that is, and actually even though there is a skills shortage in the UK, I've already seen some of my clients very cleverly adapting now to opening offices in Malta to attract Italian and Spanish, where unemployment's high. And I love the way that flexibility. But the key thing I think is that it's the commoditization. And I know that there was a period where you actually, I loved your website. I don't know whether you changed it. There was a point, and you've moved on. I saw you rebranded a lot, and I know that's naturally your size. But there was a time when you obviously were feeling an element of commoditization, because you said, "Well, not only can we do your PPC for you, but we'll also build your in-house team." There was, because obviously sometimes in an agency you have to keep moving up the value chain so that the clients need you, and they can't do what you're doing in-house, right? Because ultimately, we just become a high-cost subcontracting model business otherwise, So how have you moved up the value chain? I'm just to digress from the scale thing for a minute. I'm curious to know.
I just think our job is to be one step ahead of what clients can do themselves, right? And our existence depends on it, or our ability to combine people in a unique combination that delivers more than the sum of its parts. And if you leave your proposition as it is today and don't develop it, then clients will take it over, or another agency will come in and take your business. And that needs to be written on a quarterly, biannual, yearly basis. Like, what is your proposition, and how does it work? Because if you're not updating it, then you're not updating your product. Ultimately, or what you're selling. So I think it's funny that you pulled up that example, because it couldn't look more different today in terms of the breadth of services. And I think some of it's moving up the strategic value chain, let's say. But I think the principle is more important in this instance, rather than like specific services, which is what you were doing a year ago ain't going to cut it today. And
the people that work for you need to be also, in that same vein, they need to be investing in themselves, right? To make sure that they aren't being commoditized, and investing in their own learning and development, and the company investing too, right?
And actually, I have not seen this. I can't remember if I saw this as a theme in any of your materials, but I'm sure you would have spoken about it in this context. But new business is the best exercise for refreshing what the proposition is, and for testing out, like pushing yourself a little bit further than when you are. And we've worked with and acquired businesses who like would never pitch anything that they haven't done before. It was like, well, how can we pitch something that we haven't actually done? Like, you know, you guys are pitching stuff that you've never done before. Like, that's, you know, where's your integrity kind of thing? It's like, well, not quite. Like, you know, you have to believe that you can actually deliver it. And you know, we've never overpromised and underdelivered, because that's you know, you can't win business and then lose it. I mean, you just cannot do that.
You can always create an internal project, you know, fame project, or do something pro bono with a client, right? To prove that
invest in it, right? Make it happen, like find a way to make it happen, and like use that like to push the business forward and to innovate with your product set, because that's an amazing opportunity. Well, I love new business, and I think, you know, I think every agency founder / CEO should be involved in one capacity. Like, I think as you think about scaling up, and whether it's 1 to 50, 50 to 100, you can certainly bring in new business people to facilitate some of the architecture or the sort of happenings behind the scenes in a new business pitch process. But there's magic that happens in a pitch, and you know, I'll say every character is different, right? If someone's found that that's not their strength, then fair enough. But you know, I would always encourage, you know, agency founders and CEOs to write themselves into the pitch process, not out, because no new business is no agency. So, you
know, I love that you say that, because I spend a lot of, I think what's really clear to me as well, and I hope people listening can really pick on this. I think your mindset is saying all the right things to me, like the things that I hear, like the fact that I too hear people saying, I'm not going to go for something that I've never done before. And by the way, I also do, there's a caveat there, because I know some people end up doing everything for everybody, and it's what you're saying is very different. It's sometimes going for something strategically that you know is a future service line, and you know, you've got to test those things out. But I think, I love your mindset, and your approach clearly demonstrates that. And I think, you know, I don't know whether because you were at Google at the beginning, you know, maybe you were there seeing how fast that business was, because technology businesses have always been very good at iterating and moving forwards. And I think that's something that agencies have got to be really mindful of as we move more than ever. But the pitch side of it, it's, you know, I used to tell the story that when I sold the business to Gyro, and they were about 100 million business, we became 100 million in total. I remember, you know, there was a pitch team. I was invited in as like head of digital I think we did like a pitch to Rolls-Royce or something like that. And I'm in this room, and it was magical piece of theatre, which I hadn't really experienced before, you know, to that degree. I think we went into Rolls-Royce's offices, and they wanted us to increase like the sales on the new baby Rolls-Royce by they wanted us to find 100 sales. So we went to the offices, and they got the sales, or they used to have like written sales orders in there. Yeah. We photocopied them all and got the grads to write out 100 orders and put them on the wall and said, this is how many orders we've got to get for you through this campaign. But anyway, the point was, the CEO turned up at the beginning, and he said, I'm here today. In fact, by the way, I was doing this actually before then, but even when it was 100 million, he still turned up and said, I'm here today because you're a really important client. And I want you to know that, you know, I'm here because, you know, we really want your business, but the real talent is to my right. And then, you know, hand over the team. They demonstrate how capable, but it's, you know, I think that was quite clever.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the doesn't translate amazingly well to video pictures, by the way. So it's been a bit different than the last year and a half. I'm not sure what you've seen in your mix, but I'll say pictures now much more transactional. Right? There's no chat.
I heard Stephen Bartlett say that he would turn up to pitches and they'd want his autograph.
No one's ever asked me for my autograph, Spencer.
I was like, but isn't that quite funny that he got to the stage where he was pitching against Vaynerchuk? Yeah. And they said they were obviously really big Vaynerchuk fans, because he turned up, because he said he was pitching and they had like a Vaynerchuk background or something. And but then he was saying how they asked me. So I thought that was great, that in a way you build up your personal brand to the level where you know, you are famous, and then you end up, people want selfies with you.
Yeah, so I think it's awesome, and credit to them. I think and it was very generous of you to call me out in your book on personal branding. I can't remember what page it was, but I noticed. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't hoping that in a negative way. I hope you took that positively.
No, of course it was. It was awesome.
I always get asked, in fact, my good friend Carl Barker, who owns Cube 3 in Manchester, and he said he did a LinkedIn post not long ago, and he said, you know, who's a good example of a non-egotistical, eccentric person who's got a good personal brand? And I went, Daniel Gilbert, you know? So,
yeah. Well, I think there's, it comes back to a very, very early part of the conversation around marketing. Like, what are you going to do that's different or stands out in some way? I think, I would even look at personal brand in a similar context. Like, it's probably helpful to get you from 0 to 250 people, and not unhelpful in the 250 to 1,000. But there becomes a certain point where you're pitching for multi-million-dollar, fee income, and actually probably doesn't help, right? Because the agency needs to be systematically geared up to be brilliant, not reliant on some sort of personality or ego. So in some ways, like, it can go the opposite direction, and God forbid anyone should ever ask me for my autograph. But
I remember losing a big pitch with AXA because we were. I think I was doing £1 million pitch simultaneously, and the team were tied up on that, and I couldn't spare the resource. Our only resource spare was me and my biz dev manager, and we went down and we basically got blown out because we didn't bring the team with us. So it totally goes full circle.
You call this out, and I think it was one of the very initial principles that I learned from you in a Cactus event was around casting. And you really need to be mindful of who are the clients that want to hear from me, for example, as one part of the casting, and who are the ones that are going to be like, well, you're not going to do any of the work, so what are you doing here? It can really be something that makes the difference between winning a piece of business and not. And you'd be surprised how many times you think you're brilliant, but actually no one cares. So,
and the casting thing was clever because I don't know if I shared the story with you that time, but it's worth repeating here. So we were pitching for Virgin Trains, and we mapped who the client was versus us in the agency. And my counter, because if you remember back in the 2000s, okay, so you started the business really pretty much at the end of that period, which was really the founding period of paid search and all those digital marketing. But back in those days, in fact, really funnily, a client said this to me the other day, and I was like, that's exactly what I say, which was the youngest person in the marketing team in the 2000s became head of digital marketing. It wasn't because they were the only one who knew anything about computers, right? So basically, at Virgin, I think my counterpart, so I'm 38 now, I think I'm about 38. I'm going to work wearing jeans, a t-shirt and a jacket. Shirt and a jacket. And basically, we've done the matching thing, and we've realized my counterpart is head of digital marketing. She's 22. Yeah. So the biz dev guy turns around to me and he's like, right, Spencer, I need you to dress down. And I'm like, I am dressed down. He goes, no, Converse, ripped jeans, old scruffy t-shirt. And it's like, I'm 38 trying to dress like a 22-year-old, trying to help with the whole matching thing, Yeah,
you don't want to go too far with that.
But anyway, there we go. So tell me about like the next phase then. So, so going from sort of that 90, 100, you're now what in UK and US? Where do you go from there? I mean, obviously you've got big ambitions and that helps, but
I think the 100 to 200, I didn't try and pull that out as a phase. I'll probably say about the 100 to 200 was the introduction of the US business.
Okay.
And look, I mean, I think it was a combination of all the aforementioned things coming together and having a really, really tight product offering that was relevant to that market at the time. And just getting out there and repeating it. I mean, there was a real phase where it was like, we absolutely knew. I mean, we knew before we walked into a pitch that we won it because the product offering was just so tight and the results that we were getting were so brilliant and it gave us so much confidence. And I think that's circuitous, right? Like you keep winning them and you win more.
Fantastic case studies as well. Like you must have given you so much confidence to go in and say you're working with the brands at that stage now.
Yeah. And, without tooting our own horn too much, right? Like we're competing in a market where 90% plus of it was tied up into networks who are full of absolutely brilliant people who know what to do, but are spending 80% of their time fixing legacy issues. So we really should be able to win with a blank canvas and bright people and, a client that is buying services from that group of people. So I say we can't overcredit ourselves really that much. Like there's really no excuse not to win. when you think about it. So
when did growth through acquisition kick in for you?
So when we got to about 200 people, we started thinking about our strategic options, let's say, is the code word in corporate finance world. And I think it was just a case of, look, we've done fantastically on our own, let's say, to date, and love the journey. I wonder what it would look like if we continue to accelerate the pace at which we're growing, and what that might be. So we genuinely looked at a load of options, and I never thought that we would end up taking a private equity investment. But that's where we landed. And that was in part because the same networks who we've been competing with, full of all these brilliant people, I just didn't think that they could innovate at the pace that we could. And then we had this investor saying, well, we like it. We think you should be doing some M&A as well. Do you want to carry on in the business? Well, yeah. What else am I going to do? I love it. So by the end of it, it was an absolute must-do deal with private equity, who hadn't really been in our space previously. And it's been an incredible journey since. They've been an amazing partner, helped us put in the discipline in some of the areas that were a bit wibbly wobbly, and have put in, let's say, or have helped us invest in increasingly top talent. I talked about the voyage. Well, there were some missing parts of the boat, let alone parts that were broken. Like we weren't going to get another 100 miles if we didn't really have a new sail or some extra parts to steer the ship. And we brought in some incredible talent, which I look around every day, and I'm totally privileged to work with some of these brilliant people, many of whom really just want to do something innovative and change direction of their careers and build something. We've bought 4 agencies, I think, since then. With 2 to announce hopefully in the next 2 months, which is I think when you talk about the, let's say, 200 to 500 person, with incredible underlying organic growth, because you can't do acquisitions without serious organic momentum. That's the kind of, let's say, the last 2 years from 250 to 500 people, most of which growth probably come in the last 12 months after a COVID dip year. But yeah, with a completely different discipline, really, I've had to relearn, what I think business is and what I think an agency is yet again, which is incredibly fun, and probably far more focus on finance than ever before, in the context of doing M&A and so on, and how it comes back into the business, as well as upping my own discipline about how I think about business and communicate that with a different set of stakeholders to the ones that I've previously had, who, let's say, reported to me, and I sort of said, well, we're going to do this, and everyone would say, great, off we go. So really different now, but challenging and exciting in an entirely different way.
In a way, you're, I think a lot of people don't really understand. I talk a lot about this, actually, Daniel, but understanding the value of your asset. And I guess, when you have a house, I either have a house or a home, I say, you buy a house that you're going to live in, and you might move on, but sometimes you buy a home and well, regardless whether it's a house or a home, you not often want to decorate it, add value to it, because ultimately one day you might have to sell your house, or you might want to sell your house, and you want to increase the value. And the thing about businesses as well, that as you get bigger, obviously you become more valuable, because the way that they are, the multiples go higher. And for you to be able to mix that in, are you buying business to cross sell, or is it mainly is it the same services or complementary?
Yeah, predominantly, it's been the story is around revenue synergy. So yes, exactly that, cross sell. Who's our current clients, where there's an opportunity to do even more work with them and tie together some streams, and likewise with the businesses that we're buying. Which clients do they have who would benefit from some of our services, and who's which businesses that we're buying, where in delivering those revenue synergies, can we create even more opportunities for the people working there? Because it's no good to buy something and then everyone wants to leave. Cool. I mean, predominantly revenue, certainly not cost driven, right? Like the cost driven synergies in an agency environment are really never going to get you that far, if I'm honest. So,
no, you have to focus on the value first, don't you? Really?
Yeah, just not enough.
Yeah, it's good. So I think I love that you've taken that approach, and I think not everyone. Yeah, it's not uncommon to take that approach, but I think the partners that you chose are also got a great reputation. I've heard great things about them as well. So only positive things. So it sounds like you definitely got some good people there as well.
Yeah, we do. And like with everything else, like you create the opportunity to choose someone that you really want to work with, and that was the case for us, and we've borne fruit from it for sure. So
and they give you more options, right? Because I think that's the challenge for me. Is I got to a point where I didn't have the funds to do the acquisitions I wanted to do. I didn't have and actually I did meet private equity, but my personal experience was I didn't feel comfortable with the people that I met. And I don't know whether there was as many around in the agency space back when I did my journey. But
no, they wouldn't have done any deals at that time, right? Where's the plant and machinery, and all the talent walks out the door. So it's kind of like, well, what am I investing in? It could all go.
Exactly. But now I think it's been different. I think there's and especially for someone like yourself, really, where you clearly got a great foundation that can be built on. So
and I think that's an important point to make, right? Is that private equity will look at it without any rosy glasses about the amazing work that you do or the incredible clients that you've got. It's like, is it a well-run business with a diversified portfolio, and good business discipline all the way throughout? And we'd always, from day one, had that.
So will you be on the NASDAQ soon?
What's that?
Will you be on the NASDAQ soon?
I mean, I think, I had at some point talked or thought about listing. We love
more revenue, aren't you, than quite a lot of businesses on the NASDAQ these days?
Yeah, but certainly by next year, for sure. We'd probably be big enough by next year if we continue the momentum that we've got. But actually, we love the current structure of the business and the partners that we've got, because it's more long-term thinking. It's super attractive for other businesses to buy into that structure. And I think in agency land, a lot of what we do, don't really want public necessarily, not because it's bad stuff, but just because it's you just don't want people talking about it until maybe 2 years later when your accounts are filed or something and you've had to write down this, that, or the other. So we're super happy. And I think, if there was ever anything that got in the way of our growth, then like every other barrier, I would remove it or smash it. But actually at the moment, I think it's our structure, the private equity structure, is really quite an enabler for us in many different ways, from the ability to buy other businesses and offer an amazing package to them, as well as hire great people. So now super happy. And I think, the only barrier at the moment is ourselves. And as always,
it's funny. I recognize a characteristic in you speaking, which came up when I did the personal brand stuff. We did a couple of assessments, Pete and I, and one of the things that Pete and I are very good at doing is cutting through, it's taking down the barriers and pushing through. And you've said that many a time in this interview. And I think, I meet a lot of agency founders, a lot of you listening, where, they'll find a barrier to put up to prevent them going through it, or retreat back to something in the business. But I think if they can switch their mindset to what you said, I think it will make their lives a lot easier. Is how do you simplify things?
I've got a good one for you on that one. And like this happens even in our business, right? Where, there's a lot of very ambitious and hungry folk. It's like people use the word impossible all the time. You can't do that. It's like, you can't do that. Oh, well, okay. A great question that you should empower every single person in the agency, or in let's say a designated member of any meeting, is say, well, what would have to be true in order for this to happen? Right. And then people start going down that route. It's like, well, we would need to hire this person and that person, and we need to do that and that. I was like, oh, okay, well, should we do that then? It's amazing how many times that can happen, because people just, discount based on what they think someone else is thinking, or what other people are doing, or what's conventional, or what you've said before, and they take that as maybe pattern or something. It's like, well, I said no then because this, and this, and this, but actually, well, let's get on with it. So designate someone to be that person if it's not you. Because I think you're so right. I mean, people just invent non-existent barriers and talk themselves out of doing things that really they might have unleashed their success more. So
I think if you've managed to create a culture where people are thinking that way, and then that's amazing, because I think that empowering people to because what's that saying, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Exactly.
Getting your teeth forward. I mean, that I spend my life quoting that to people, because they say, well, I can't do that. I'm going, well,
of course you can't.
But so listen, I mean, and so obviously, that stage where you partner with private equity, it's enabled you to take a different approach to scale up. Where's the next step then? Do you I know you want to be the largest in the world. Is there how many people is that? Like you're at 500 now, so where does that need to go to?
500. I mean, the largest in the world is a 30-year view, I think. So we've got time. The next step to get from 500 to 5,000 has a component of internationalization. So really we want to take the winning formula that we've got with a highly developed digital media product offering in both the UK and the US, and we're in more territories now. We've entered into Canada and a couple of other places through acquisition, and the aim now is to really develop and spread out our product offering in different places. So there's lots of things that are not that strategy does not involve as well. By the way, you have to decide what you're not doing, which because unlimited number of things that you could do. But that's really the next phase. And I think in doing so, not only are you opening up more domestic markets for more clients, but you're opening up a different set of client that's more global and that can't really buy you until you're in lots of different places. So that's the next phase, really, or the meaningful phase, let's say, of I can't remember how many we've got to now, 5, 6.
Yeah, I think you've broken them down quite nicely. I think it's. I appreciate I've really put you on the spot a little bit. Probably walk away going, I should have said this, I should have said that, but that's fine because I think
it's never that discreet, right? You don't just suddenly go from one to the other. It's a gradual continuum, isn't it? And,
but it's. I think a lot of people, they see success stories like you, and I think that people are looking ahead for barriers to break through. But I think a lot of things you've mentioned are a lot of the basic fundamental things that still people need to put in place, which is you have a driver. I mean, for me, it was fear. You're clearly you've got this driver, this success drive. You break through. You create cut through and break down barriers. You don't. You're not looking to hit obstacles. You're trying to bring them down and keep the momentum. And I think there's some really strong lessons in your mindset which people should hopefully take from this. Good. Well, we're long in the tooth. I wonder if there's anything that your listeners might want to know before we close up. I might have a quick look at the comments actually, because I weirdly put myself onto Oh yeah, there you go. Spencer Dan, living the dream. Living the dream, indeed. Thank you. I think Seth Godin was the one that did the quote. Yes, he's brilliant. It probably was Seth Godin, actually. Well, I think I quoted him elsewhere with remarkable marketing because he's got that concept of a purple cow. Where of course. If you see lots of regular-looking cows and then you see a purple one, then you'll stop. So make sure your marketing is thumb-stopping, let's say. Yeah, I love that. So, look, thank you for your time. I can't believe it's actually like we were an hour and 15. We've flown by, but I appreciate. You are running a very big business, and I really appreciate you. I'm grateful that you gave up time today to come on this show. Pleasure. I'm sure you have so many more important things to do. No, if there was one thing that someone took away, then I'm happy. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. No worries. And listen, I wish you all the best of luck with the rest of your journey, and I will continue to watch with admiration. Thank you. I remember just before you go, you remember calling me up a couple of years ago, or maybe it was 3 years ago. We had a call and you said to me, "Hi, Spencer, I need some advice from you." And I went, "You're asking me for advice? You've just grown a business to like 300 staff in 4 years or whatever it was. I should be asking you for advice." Well, I don't remember it, but you're still very helpful. So we're still friends. Yeah. So listen, it's great to have you here. Great to see you. Thanks again for your support. And pleasure. Thanks to everyone who's listening live. And more importantly, I know that we're now getting a few thousand people actually watching some of the episodes following up now. So no doubt this will be picked up. If you haven't got your new copy of the book, there's my plug. But thank you, Dan. And I recently, I've just swapped over the intro today because I wanted to get straight into talking to Dan. But a big thank you to Caitlin, who produces the show behind the scenes, Abby for getting everyone's PAs together, Dan, and making it happen. Thank you to Forecast, our sponsors, for all of their help. They fund a lot of the stuff in our community, which is all not-for-profit social enterprise. And and that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you for having me.